All right, here we go. We are seeing a whole whack of people join in our webinar. We're going to give folks about a minute and then we're going to get rolling, get this thing started. As you're joining, please have a look at the poll. Quick question will give us a bit of a sense of where everybody's at in terms of their SharePoint usage and make sure that we can tweak the content that we talk about today to the audience that you folks are.
And there goes the 1 minute bell.
All right, we are going to honor those who are on time and get going with our webinar. Thank you very much for joining. This is SharePoint 101. It's better in the clouds. We are in the clouds and we are ready to go. Today, we are going to take you through great topic. We've seen all sorts of phenomenal response. I think this is our highest number of registrants that we've ever had for a webinar. Up close to 100 people that registered to join this webinar today. So obviously SharePoint is front of mind, big interest. If this is your first webinar with us, here's how it rolls. We aim to be about 30 minutes or so of content. We'll go through a bunch of information and then we leave lots of time at the end for questions. This webinar is going to be a little bit different. That we're going to allow you to do a little choose your own adventure. So we've got a bunch of live demos that we're going to do. If there are specific things that you want to see, please put them in the Q&A panel. And we can change a little bit. We can adjust. We can answer questions as we go. We can show you other stuff. It doesn't necessarily need to be what we've come up with. We figure that there's two types of audiences that we have for today. I just want to make sure everybody is seeing the poll. I just relaunched our poll. There we go. So we have two types of audiences. Want to get some feedback from all of you on what type of audience that you are. We figure audience number one is not using SharePoint, currently using file server, VPN, et cetera, thinking about moving to SharePoint. Audience number two, using SharePoint, maybe in early days, maybe haven't quite mastered it, looking to figure out how to use it a little bit better. And based on our poll, Jermaine, what I'm seeing is about 20% of people, entire company is using SharePoint. All of their stuff is in SharePoint. 53% some is in SharePoint. So kind of a little bit of a hybrid deal. And then 25% are not using SharePoint. And then one person has answered, what is this SharePoint nonsense?
I knew that was to get someone. I'm glad they chose that.
Hopefully we can sort out everybody today. By way of introduction, as you will see at the bottom of his screen, I'd like to introduce Jermaine, our Vice President of Operations at Techify. Welcome,
Great
Jermaine.
to be here. Thanks, Brendan.
It's great to have you. My name is Brendan Howe, and I'm the CEO. And together, Jermaine and I like to take people through, I like to do these webinars. Jermaine gets tortured by me and forced to do them. And we like to take people through the technology stuff we think they need to know, but in plain English so that folks can keep up with what's going on in the world. And before we get into the meat of our subject today, want to just advertise our next webinar that's coming up, which is another Microsoft 365 webinar. Are you torturing your team with email overload and bad meetings? So we're finding a lot of really good feedback from the webinars we have about Microsoft 365 using it better, whether it's SharePoint, whether it's Teams, whether it's other things. And a lot of feedback we're getting from people these days is they're getting overloaded with email. And meetings aren't as effective as they could be, and that sort of stuff. So we're going to show 5 different ways to get more productive through 365 and deal with a couple of those issues and some other productivity issues out there. So April 19th, 1 p.m., you can use that QR code that's up on your screen there to register, or you can go to techify.ca/webinars. It is live and ready to register. So I want to get to our live demos, our how-tos as soon as possible, but I'll start with a little bit of context. Everybody is using SharePoint. Well, not quite everybody, but a lot of people are using SharePoint. According to Microsoft, over 250,000 organizations use SharePoint, and that includes over 85% of Fortune 500 companies are using SharePoint as part of Microsoft 365. This is the way that the world is going. File servers are going goodbye. People are not using file servers anymore. The S drive, the Q drive, the T drive, the whatever drive, the VPN connections to it. It is no longer is older technology. It is not being updated or invested in by Microsoft. There's a bunch of security risks, et cetera, et cetera. It's time to move to SharePoint if you haven't already. If you're the 25% of folks that are on this call and that are not in SharePoint already, that's the way the world is going. That's the future, and it opens you up to a whole bunch of other things, which we will get into. Jermaine, why don't you tell us what SharePoint is?
Oh, in the short term, in the shortest term I can define it, SharePoint is a web-based collaboration and document management platform. It is extremely flexible, can allow you to do a lot of things, but primarily most people that are in SharePoint today, they use it to store documents, communicate information across organizations, and to work with companies across the world, right? Partners across the world. And overall, it is a upgraded, newer, modernized version, replacing your on-premise file server with your VPN, even an on-premise SharePoint server, because some people say, hey, we're in SharePoint, but it's actually in a SharePoint server on-prem at their office, which again is another misnomer that you can replace there by having that fully cloud-based online collaboration platform.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about why. We're going to talk a little bit more about why people move to SharePoint in a sec. But one quick question that we always have to answer here. People ask all the time, what is the difference between SharePoint and OneDrive? Why is that? I don't know. Do I use OneDrive? Do I use SharePoint? SharePoint's collaboration, OneDrive is personal. So if you think about the old file server days, everybody had their own personal drive that they would save documents kind of only for them. And then they had the file server that was shared, had folders that were shared with tons of people. If people get confused about this, people try and use OneDrive as a full collaboration tool across a company. It creates all sorts of different issues. OneDrive permissions and stuff like that are not built to have 20, 30, 40 people across a company accessing different folders. It's built to be your personal file storage, right? And SharePoint allows you to create a bunch of different libraries, a bunch of different security permissions, a bunch of different workflows, all that sort of stuff. So SharePoint is for your company, OneDrive is for you. If you are at a company that is using OneDrive for across the company, not using SharePoint, you will be heading in a direction of some pain in the future. And I would suggest dealing with that. So why are people moving? Why are people moving to SharePoint? Jermaine, we're seeing kind of everybody across our client base moving to SharePoint for the most part, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the key aspects of that is realistically, because of the way we work today and because of the way we've been forced to work, more people are working remote, they're working from anywhere, and they need a good organizational platform that can share, organize files, and collaborate across geographic distances, across office distances. Even if you're in the same building on different floors, you want to be able to collaborate and work on all the different files, clients, structure, et cetera, that you have. And working from everywhere with new security within the cloud space, it's better collaboration all around. So you can scale if you're a company of 1 or a company of 500. You have the ability and reliability of the systems being up, because if a person's site or specific place goes down, there's duplications, replications, etc. So you can still function. It's simple the simplicity of SharePoint across the board. And it's centralized, allowing real-time collaboration, which we will see later on in our how-tos, and around traceability and security. Like, where's the file? How did the file get there? Where did the file move to, et cetera, et cetera. You'll be able to do a lot with that online. So people are moving to it because it makes the most sense for their businesses.
Yeah. They're also moving it because we can save 4 hours per week per employee. There's huge productivity opportunities with it. Huge productivity opportunities. If you've been on one of our webinars before, you would have heard this. It allows you to get rid of VPN, that painful VPN, that technology that's a bolt-on that originally is based out of 1980s technology that frustrates so many people and causes productivity or slowness issues or stuff like that. We can just get rid of VPN. We don't have to worry about that anymore. We can get rid of multiple versions of documents, that email overload, the frustration, the sort of overwhelm of not being able to find things, right? Feeling like there's files everywhere, but you can't find what you need. In fact, there's been studies that have shown information workers spend up to 20%. They can spend up to 20% of their time just looking for documents, looking for information. If you can eliminate most of that, you can give people back a whole bunch of their time. And then the security side of things. This is the other reason that people are moving to SharePoint. Believe it or not, if you have stuff in a closet or server room in your office, in a box that's sitting there, that is actually less secure than a data center that Microsoft has invested billions and billions of dollars in. You cannot rival the security investment, the level of technology between MFA, conditional access, different data loss prevention capabilities, that sort of thing that are built into SharePoint. You just can't compare with your own infrastructure that's in the office. So you can take a leap forward in your cybersecurity posture by moving to SharePoint. And it's a reason a lot of people are doing it. All right, so enough of the background. Here's where we're getting into the how-tos. Here's what we're gonna go through today. We're gonna go live demo with all the risk that's enabled with a live demo. And we're going to go through these 8 things: how to use SharePoint, how to access SharePoint, how to use SharePoint, real-time collaboration, saving files, opening files, searching, using version control, stopping sharing files, and how to secure your environment. So here's the choose your own adventure part. If there is anything that is not on this list that you would like to see, I already see one question about external sharing, which we will get in the external sharing side of things. If there's anything that you want to see as we go through, toss stuff into the Q&A panel. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and Jermaine is going to take over. And Jermaine is in charge of the Highwire Act, which is live demo world.
Right. So, as usual, we hope that everything will work when we do this. Well, let's see where we end up. First, I'm going to get rid of this so that it's not in the front of my screen. There we go. Okay. So first things first, how do we access SharePoint? We want to make sure that we give you an example here of all the different ways you can access SharePoint. And the purpose of this, of course, would be that in any event, based on your preference, you can find up to 4 different ways that you can get to your SharePoint site, right? 4 awesome ways.
4 different ways.
4 different ways, yeah, not just the one. And even though I've preempted here's my desktop. I like it nice and clean so I can see across the mountains. But we're gonna pop through that, and I'll show you 4 cool ways you can access your SharePoint. The first place that we're gonna go is we'll start with Microsoft Teams, because Microsoft Teams is kind of the all-encompassing front end for all your communication, calls, meetings, documents, etc. And we've got a prepared demo site here that is a team within my Microsoft Teams infrastructure here. And on that demo site, I go to the general page. And in the general page, I've got tons of things pinned to the top here for the webinar. I can click on the file section here, and here I can see files that are in my SharePoint. So I've now accessed SharePoint directly through Teams via the demo platform that we set up for the webinar. The second place that we can go is I can open up my File Explorer, And my file explorer is, used to be Windows Explorer at some point. It's still on every computer. You click the little manila folder there, it opens up. And I can see my Techify work OneDrive. So we talked a little bit about OneDrive earlier. That's my personal file storage. And I've got all these files linked up to my OneDrive. And from here, I can actually click on that. And these files are all within the same environment. So if I go here and I click on our demo document section and I click on general, here's the same set of files that I can see that I just accessed in my Teams over here. So now I've got two local areas where I can now access, and this is all still the same files that are in SharePoint. The third way is, if you're old school, new school, or otherwise, and you're like me, you want to access it out of the web browser to do everything because you find it seamless, faster, etc. You can just go to your Microsoft page for your company, portal.microsoft.com. If you were to type that in, you're a Microsoft 365 user, you type that in, it'll take you straight to your homepage for your organization. There's Techify. And then I can click on the 4 little dots up on the top here. You'll see tons of apps available. The one I'm looking for, SharePoint. There it is. I just click on that, and now I'm here. Now, whoa, there's so much stuff. But I was looking at a specific group or a specific site that I was following. So I'm just going to click on that, and I'm going to go straight to the demo site. And when I go to the demo site, and I click on the general file folder again, here's the list of the same documents that are in my Teams and via my file browser, my File Explorer on my computer. So now I've gone through and we've looked at it from File Explorer, OneDrive. We've looked at it from Teams and now straight out of your browser. And all the files are identical, in the same place, in the same location. So you're not looking at duplicates of the same file. You're looking at multiple files, the same file in multiple locations from different origins. All right, I'm going to keep going along. Brendan, keep an eye on that Q&A section so we can direct my changes as we move along.
Yeah, let me just insert one thing there. So there's a question about, will the slide deck be shared afterwards? We record all these webinars. Everybody that attends gets a link of the recording. Leona, if you want to just clarify, if you're looking for a lot of the meat of our stuff that we're doing today is actually in live demo, isn't in the deck. So this is being recorded. But if you want a copy of the deck, just post in the Q&A and one of our team members will reach out and give you a copy of the deck as well. There's 2 other questions that are sitting there, which we're going to get to when we talk about sharing.
Perfect. All right, so those will be answered in the demo. Awesome. The next thing we're going to talk about is how to use SharePoint. Now, the typical file folder structure that everybody else is using within their on-premise, etc. When you come to SharePoint, you can still do that. You can still create that space and have your folders granular. But the cool ways of using SharePoint is really figuring out how you can utilize sites. So areas within SharePoint that are specified to different groups, specified to different purposes. It could be realistically anything across the board, and any user and or administrator and or person in the organization could create their own sites. One of the other thing is to create sites for like staff training, create sites for external sharing for clients. One of the questions in the Q&A is, hey, can we share files externally with someone who's not in Microsoft 365 or our organization? The answer to that is yes, and we'll show you how to do that as we move along by creating a site that allows you to do that within the group. And creating those sites and organizing it really does help you to work differently and more collaboratively when you look at it from a SharePoint perspective. Because if I create a site in a group, I can create people within that group and I can send information, share documents, update links, etc. with them. And it provides you all of the information on. So if I wanted to learn more about, say, a team site, how do I create a team site? If I wanted to create the Gardeners Club of Techify, I could just go right through the how-to links here within and it gives me all the information on how to create it step by step by just clicking on the link within that team site already. So I've gone from the demo home site to hey, how do I create a new Gardeners of Techify site and add people to it, etc. All the information's here, and utilizing that at front view, it's no longer all about just accessing a file within SharePoint. It's how do I collaborate? How do I create a space where people can come and do all the stuff that they need to do? And that's how we can recommend you should be using your SharePoint.
And I would just add to that, it takes some time to get used to, this, it's a different way of working, right? So where people struggle the most with SharePoint is we're all used to these IT migrations that are like, hey, at Friday afternoon, we're shutting off access to the servers. Over the weekend, the servers are being replaced and the data is being migrated. You come in on Monday morning and you need to work, you can work exactly the same way as you were working on Friday. When you move to SharePoint, you're changing how you work for the better. But change is a bit of a challenging word for a lot of folks, especially when it comes to technology, because it takes a while to get used to it, right? And the more you understand, as Jermaine is taking us through the different ways you can use SharePoint, the more valuable it's going to be for you.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Brendan. So let's move into some real-time collaboration. How to use real-time collaboration in SharePoint. Examples of what we can typically do here for real-time collaboration. Brendan and I love using the example of we always do the slide deck together and update it in real time as we discuss, and we update different areas of the slides. You can create new documents, share a link to work on the document at the same time, etc. And
this is like the critical piece to SharePoint, and one of the main benefits of it is people can work on the same document at the same time. Multiple people can see, and it doesn't require emailing back and forth and that email overload and stuff like that. If you're on a file server, you get this locked document is locked, open read only. It's not a good way to
get
work.
notified when the person has closed the file, even though they've left and gone on vacation and the file's on their desktop open. Oops. So we want to avoid all of that and working with collaboration. So yeah, I mean, I've gone to one of these files I have here. I've opened an Excel sheet, webinar demo live. In the Excel sheet, here's my form, and I want to work on this with Brendan. So what I would want to do here is I need to get Brendan into the file. That's the first thing. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit that share link, and I can go ahead and type in, hey, there's Brendan. He popped up. I share lots of files with him. Let's get working. And then I send that along to Brendan. Brendan's going to receive a link via his email that says, Jermaine has shared this file with you. Click here to access the file. So I'm going to sit here for a couple of seconds while Brendan gets in. And right now, it can tell you who is in the file when you're working on it. So before he got into the file, there was nothing here on the pane saying that someone else was here. But now there's a picture of Brendan. He says he's editing. It even shows me from the pop-up link here what cell he's in and what he's editing, right? And if I wanted to, I could click here to go to his location, and I would see where he's editing the file. He's a different color. I'm a different color. And we're moving along and editing the file as we need to be. Now, this can be done for any document that is within the Microsoft space, from a Word document, Excel, PowerPoint, etc. You can work on those and collaborate on it together, which is the main thing in terms of, as Brendan said, the main focus of the collaboration platform is to be able to do this in real time. So everybody's working on the same document. There's no more, hey, who's got the current version or anything like that.
And so one of the questions that came up in the Q&A panel is, can this sharing, can this collaboration happen with somebody outside my environment? So can we allow it to happen outside the environment if somebody doesn't work at our company?
So the answer is yes. You can create a specific external sharing site that allows yourself and an external participant, whether they're on Google or otherwise, as long as they have access to the file via your organization, they would be able to participate in doing that. So as an organization, we do that with several of our clients, where we have an external sharing location where they can work with us on specific documents that we're plowing through, which we then finalize and move into their secure sharing area. So only the clients and ourselves have access to that folder externally. So you can do that.
Vicky, your question is yeah. The answer to your question is yes, obviously, with what Jermaine said. And it's the same way, whether they're external or internal to your organization, what you're seeing us do right now. And we'll show when we talk about, there's another question about external sharing and how to make it secure. We'll talk about that a little bit later in our demos, and we'll show you a little bit about Jermaine's got a Gmail address that he's gonna show, and we'll walk through that as well.
Yeah, and you know what? Despite what some people might think, we do love Gmail. Gmail is great.
Oh, one more thing too. You're seeing the web version right now of Excel.
Correct.
So just so folks know, with this, you don't have to use the web version. You can use the app version, like the desktop app version. So you just go, as Jermaine is showing, go to edit, you just click open in desktop version. And for those that are in finance and use like crazy macros and all sorts of fancy stuff that may not be available in the web version of Excel, you can open up, or if you just prefer using the desktop version, have at it. You can do it that way as well. Same goes for Word and PowerPoint and all that sort of stuff.
And just to highlight to everyone, because it will come up in the questions, you can see here that it's the exact same file. Name is the same. It shows that Brendan's in the location he is working on the file, and I'm within the file on itself. And then this will come up later on as we continue to discuss it, but there's an auto save button here for all of those of you who forget to save or are so entrenched in the work that you get to the end and you're like, oh no, I really should Control S this or save it. Definitely something that's useful, and later on you can always turn this off if you don't want it to auto save at any particular point within the document.
So keep the questions coming. Don't go away from there quite yet, Jermaine, because there's one other thing that we should just show. And I think you were going to get into this later, but might as well show it now. Question came up: can the contents of the document be secured so that only specific people can edit the content, but others can view it? So giving permissions and saying, hey, you're allowed to see real-time live version of this document, but you can't do anything with it.
Absolutely. And that's a great question. What we would do here is under the sharing pane, what we can do is we can manage access to it. So if we decide we would like to share this file with someone else in the organization, what we can do here is you can see it's already preset as people you specify can edit. If I wanted to secure the file and give people only an option where they cannot edit the file, I would click the little caret under the pencil here and go to can view, cannot make changes. So it's as simple as saying, hey, I'd like you to be able to look at this document, but I don't want you messing about with my macros or any of that. You select that and then share it to the group or a specific person. And when they open the document, it doesn't matter what they do, they won't be able to save and or edit any changes to the document you shared.
So if you wanted Barney Rubble to be able to see the document, but you didn't think that he was competent enough to actually edit it, or you were worried that he was going to mess it up, then Barney Rubble is not coming up. It's unfortunate. You could say view only. Yeah,
you can just select view only. And you can see here that it is changed and it is identifying to you what your setting is. People you specify can view, no edit option. And you can do this granularly for every document. You can do it to a folder and share an entire folder of documents, because the permissions is inherited by the documents contained within the folder. So you can set the permission at the folder level when you share. They can only view the folder contents, not edit any of them.
Ooh, here's another good question, and we're gonna go a little bit longer. We've got a few other things to show, but I think it's important that we answer these questions as we go along. So, Catherine, hopefully that answer your question. Leona had a question about: can you allow external persons import and export, like upload, download documents to designated folders without them being added as a user to your SharePoint?
Yeah, so that you'd have to have an external sharing site that allows that. The answer is yes. And with good measure, you can set that up and ensure that you can have the external user add or remove folders files as you'd like. So as an example, if you are in an organization where you exchange documents on a consistent basis with your client, the client can add documents to that folder. You can review them. You can add your documents. They can see and or download or upload the documents that you've added to the folder as well. And those settings can all be configured to allow the external users to do that.
Okay, so keep the questions coming in the Q&A panel as we go through. We're going to show you a few other things now.
Okay, so let's jump along. One of the key questions that we typically get from clients and or people that are interested in utilization of SharePoint is how do I save files? And that might sound silly since I've already shown you can just click auto save. But the question isn't how can I save files by containing the file itself. It's how do I save a brand new file to the right location in the right place within SharePoint? Because as normal, people can go here and say file, I want to save this file as. And when you are appropriately configured in Microsoft 365 with your OneDrive and your SharePoint, your destinations only give you a couple of options. One being your OneDrive, if you want to save it there, or the second being your Techify, in this case, my Techify, sharing all the sites that I'm a member of. So I'm going to select the demo site here. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to pick a folder in the demo site, which is, let's just go to say documents. And in documents, I'll click on general, because in general, that's where all the files are that I was talking to you and showing you earlier in every single version of this. So I'm in the same place. I'm going to go ahead and save this file here. Okay, and hit save. So all I did was I went file save as I would on a regular domain computer network with a server, file save as for the document. It gives me the options of where to go. And I click on, I want to save this to the general SharePoint site under the demo group. So it shows me demo general. I save the file with the name, hit save. And now the file is saved. The auto save button has turned on. Browse version history has just popped up in front of me ahead of time because it knows what's coming next. And I'll go, got it, get rid of that. But the important note here is that I've just saved the file that was just created on my computer up to our SharePoint so that everyone can see it. So if I were to go back to any one of my locations and refresh the page, you'll see here that in my Windows Explorer, where I browse to my SharePoint, there's the file saved for demo. If I were to go back to my Teams, there's the file saved for demo, says a few seconds ago, right? And everything is updated live at the same time, because again, it's the same file in the same location, just being accessed through 4 multiple ways, right?
So this is applicable to if you get something in by email and you open it and you review it and then you want to save it to a project folder.
Yep.
There are ways to sort of drag and drop as well if you've got the if you got the web browser open, or you have File Explorer, not Windows Explorer. If you have File Explorer open, you can just take something from an email and drag and drop it in.
Right.
But probably the most common is the old file save as that we've all gotten used to.
The fun part here is when the situation is always, it's when you don't have the drag and drop option available is when everybody panics, right? It's like, oh no, I usually just drag and drop. How does this not work? So those are the key features that we want to give everybody a hint on from that perspective.
So the next one I'm excited about.
So
this is one of my
this one's going to be like 35 seconds. I'm going to go straight back to my demo site again. What we're doing here is how to open files and use search in SharePoint. Now, this one.
Can I just make this more than 35 seconds?
Please go for it.
Okay, so back in the dark days of file serverness, when we saved something on the network drive, we then had a huge issue about never being able to find it again. The search sucked, right? Like if you went in the search bar in your Windows Explorer and trying to find files, it was like half the time it wouldn't find them. And it was difficult to like where people saved it. So if you did that file save as, save the document, next day come in, how do we find that thing?
I've done that tons of times back in the day where I've saved a file and I didn't read where it was being saved to, and I saved it to the wrong folder, etc., and never be able to find it again. SharePoint, fortunately enough, makes it so easy that if you're in your SharePoint on a regular basis, it will actually preempt your search for your most recent files that you would have clicked on in the last little while. So if you accidentally shut down your computer because you kept hitting delay on your updates, and then the computer just took over and did your updates, it'll bring you right back to it. The other part of it is you can just type, as an example demo, and it can show you all of the results related to everything that's demo related. So it'll show you every file within the SharePoint that has demo. And it's important to note that it'll show you it in a specific order. It shows you the demo site. So it'll show you the first site associated with your demo, the word that you just wrote. Then it'll show you documents, notebooks, SharePoint specific related sites, again, to the document. Now, let's say I wanted to do demo live as an example.
So just before, Jermaine, just before you go on, I just want to point out, it also showed the most recent document that you worked on first, so the most relevant.
Correct. Most relevant, most recent. And this goes across the board for pretty much everything within your organization. You just type the word in. If you, let's say you don't know let's say you don't know exactly the name of the file, but you know the document is about awesomeness as an example. Type the word awesome, and this file contains the word "this is awesome." So it pulls up a file that has the word awesome in it because it's looking for anything that's closely related to or named with the word awesome. So search has come a long way. And just to prove a point in terms of the demo is I'll go to my Windows Explorer, which I've promised you is, you know, the same thing. And
now called File Explorer does the exact same thing as it used to.
Right, and I go here and I go search. I want to click on my demo site, and I want to hit the search demo here, and I want to go. Now the file's already in view, but there you go. Within a blink of an eye, even though I'm doing it through here, the word awesome has pulled up the file that is sitting within the same SharePoint location. Okay. Okay, I'm going to move these along so we can get through the rest of them because I know people will want to see this. The next one we're going to work on here is how to use version control. Now, we've been talking about not having the old files on the system and who's got the current version, R1, R2, V2, you know, final version 2. How many people have done that? I can't see your hands, but I'm sure I'm going to raise my hand where I was like, yes, this is the final version. And then somebody comes back with a change and I'm like, okay, final version R2.
Yeah. Have you ever worked at a company where there's like 10, 15, 20 different versions of a document? It's like every iteration with a client, a contract, and then even worse, it's being emailed back and forth. So you've got email attachments back and forth as opposed to, and then sometimes they get saved, maybe sometimes they don't. We don't know what the latest version is. So that real-time collaboration is super important. And the other thing that's super important that we didn't talk about with the collaboration is making sure you're emailing links and not emailing attachments. So the critical piece with SharePoint, with all of this collaboration, versioning, all that sort of stuff, how you use SharePoint, is that when you're sharing stuff, whether email, through Teams, through other ways, you're sending a link to the document and you're not sending an attachment back and forth, because as soon as you send an attachment, you basically break the
system. Absolutely, because you can't all work on the same attachment because it's a downloaded copy of the original that's sitting in SharePoint. Excellent point, and that'll be demonstrated in our next portion of this as we figure out how to share a file externally. So one of the key aspects of this, I've gone to the demo site again. I've clicked on the documents, the general folder where I've saved all these demo documents. And when I hover over any one of these, it highlights and it gives me options. It says, do you want to share? And then there's the, you know, the proverbial 3 ellipses here sitting there that is only begging to be clicked on. And when I click on that, it gives me 1,000 different options, or at least 15 of them in this particular section. And what I want to click on here is version history. So when you click on version history, one of the things that it does is it pulls every historical version of that file at incremental timestamps that would have saved any new changes and so on to the file. So let's say this file was brand newly created today. And then within 2 minutes of creating the file, I made a substantial change to the file. So it created 2 versions of it. I can pick any one of the older files here and go to version history. It'll pull up the version history. Now, let's say that based on this, I would like to go back to the day before Brendan ruined the edits on my perfectly created document here. I can go back and click on this version versus the version that Brendan edited. And when that version loads up, I can then go ahead and use this to compare. So you see now it's giving me options, compare it to the current version that they have, or restore this as the new current version. And once you do that, you now have an idea of who edited it, when it was edited. Maybe you saved over a template as an example, and you want to go back and get the template, the original template. You could go back to the first time you opened that document. And the good thing about it is, before you ask, how many versions can I go back? You can go back from the day the file was created as far back as 55,000 versions, just to give you an example of how many versions.
55,000.
Yeah.
That's
now that
crazy.
being said, I mean, if you have that many versions of a document, I don't know why the document even exists, because it's not the true document at that point.
So here's a good one that Nicholas just posted. If, or in brackets, when people inevitably create a separate V2 file, can you merge the files and edits?
Yes. So what you can do is compare the two files and create the edits, merge the edits into one file. Yes.
Yeah. And then provide some training and coaching for your colleagues that, hey, this is the way this is built, so you don't have to do stuff like that, and you can work a lot faster if you just make the changes to the document. You can even put in the document that you put comments, you can track your changes. There's different functionality within there. And if everybody in your organization, this is part of utilization and getting SharePoint, fully utilizing Microsoft 365. So you get that adoption across the board, and you get your most out of it. Talk to colleagues, get people talking to each other about, hey, this is how the whole foundation of this is there's a version control capability. So we're going to be much more efficient if we know that exists and we do it the following way.
That's perfect. So, okay. So last two things, how to stop sharing files with someone in SharePoint or sharing a file. This comes back to first, well, I have to share a file with someone. And if I share a file with them, how do I share it with that person and then stop them from accessing that file at a later date, especially if they're an external user? So we're going to do this for big points here. I'm going to go into that general folder again. I'm going to click on this and I'm going to share this file with someone external. So I'm going to go Jermaine.techify.
And Jermaine, as you're doing this, I just wanted to answer one of the questions. So we've got a whole bunch of questions that are in the Q&A, and we're going to try and get to all of them. So one of the questions is, can we share files from SharePoint with external individuals who do not work in a Microsoft environment? So Jermaine just typed in a Gmail address. So this is the definition of somebody that is outside of Microsoft. All they have is a Gmail address. And here's what happens.
So I get an email coming to my Gmail that says, hey, a file has been shared with you. Go ahead and open it. I open the file. There's the file. This is the same file that Brendan and I were working on. Now there are two JCs in the file, one of them being the external person's email that we just shared here, coming from this webinar. Now, I have access to this file. You've seen me open this file coming straight from my Gmail. I'm in Gmail, says Gmail up there. I click open, it opens the file. There I am as an external user to Techify at Gmail. Now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this. I'm going to go one step back here and I'm going to go back to this webinar file demo. And I want to stop sharing access with anybody else. Okay, so I'm going to click on the share button again, and I'm going to go to manage access. When I click the manage access button, I can see that I've shared this file. People you specify can edit, and there's two icons here. If I drop that little caret down, there is Jermaine.techify and says external user. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove access to that file from the user. Okay, bye-bye. Just for good measure, I'm going to hit refresh on this. And then I'm going to go back to my email where I shared the file to my Gmail. I'm going to go hit open. I'm going to give that a second to make sure it populates all the way over to Gmail so that it removes access to the file. So once it goes ahead and sends the notification that access has been removed, I'll show you what it looks like once access has been removed. Now this may be one of those situations where I'm in the same browser and it's just caching the credentials, but it should work in a little bit. So I'll come back to that. Let's give it a second to populate, percolate, etc. In terms of securing, go ahead.
The notion here is you share with somebody outside of your company, and there's a couple, like you can put an automatic end to the sharing. You can say, hey, they can only access it through the web browser version. They can't download the document, and then you can revoke that access as well after you've given it. So you can stop sharing that file on demand. Jermaine has done a phenomenal job in doing our live demo. And as you know, sometimes we're logging credentials if we're going back and forth from one environment to another. It can restore. So I think that document was thinking that Jermaine, as the Microsoft 365 user, was allowed to have access to it versus Jermaine as the Gmail.
Next time, I think what I'll do for the demo is put it in incognito mode for the Gmail account so that it shows you, because I'm not a real external user, so that did throw a hiccup there. So I'll move it over. Let's move her along, and then I'll log in on a separate document and show everybody at the end what it looks like for access denied via that.
Okay, so we have a boatload of questions that we're going to get through. We'll stay on and answer. One more thing about security that we just wanted to go through, and how to secure an environment. So there's a lot of different things that you can do with the environment in terms of settings. You can restrict access. You can restrict stuff to web only. You can put in place a lot of policies. It all comes back to something central, though. You can't manage something like SharePoint. You can't properly manage a Microsoft 365 environment in a reactive way. So you can't do the usual IT thing, which is, okay, well, we'll just put in tickets and we'll just deal with everything as a support request. And so if you have an issue, let us know, and then we'll have a look at it. Somebody needs to proactively be managing your SharePoint environment. And what it looks like to us and what's important to us is it needs to be audit, review, and aligned to best practices. Somebody should be looking at the back end of SharePoint and saying, what are our best practices from a SharePoint perspective? Are we going to allow anyone can access links, or are we going to restrict that? Because that's huge for security. Is there going to be a time limit when we share a link externally that automatically removes it so that somebody can't see a link to a document for 2 years, right? And there's 100 different examples of that sort of stuff that are all best practices, but that's the IT responsibility. That's not the user responsibility. And it's so important that that's being done in a proactive way through a proactive process that's guarding your business and protecting your data, because if somebody's not doing that, then it's exposing you to undue risk. And you have the risk of data loss. You're opening it up to whether somebody remembers or not, dealing with it a reactive way. And if you've heard us talk before, we hammer away about how important it is to have a proactive process, in addition to all of the usual IT stuff about contacting the help desk and doing projects and stuff like that. Too often people will move to SharePoint. There will be no proactive process. So the actual implementation, the adoption, the utilization of SharePoint, people don't get out of it what they wanted to, which is to save a boatload of time and those 4 hours a week per employee and stuff like that.
Okay. So before we go to the rest of the questions, though, I have to redeem our demo here. So I'm going to do one more screen share just to prove to everybody that this thing works. So as
you're setting up that screen share, I was answering one of the questions we had come in was about how is external sharing secured from my company. So I hope that was clear. It's a combination between a user responsibility and an IT responsibility to have that proactive process.
That's right.
So take it away. Our last demo.
I've removed my Gmail account, put it into no cache credentials location in a regular email in a different browser, as would be a person that's actually external to your organization. I'm in the same email. I click.
You're showing here how to stop sharing files when you want to
stop sharing files. So this is the security portion for later when you want to actually stop sharing access to the file. So this is what should have popped up in our earlier demonstration when my cached credentials was actually allowing me to log in. But because I've removed access to this Gmail account, Now, when I click on the link, it says, sorry, this email address isn't associated with the secure link. Please contact the person who shared it with you. So now, even though you had access to it previously, it's now removed access. It tells you that you don't have access anymore, and I can no longer get into the file. So hopefully that redeemed the one hiccup we've had with the demo today.
All right, excellent. So we've gone through a whole boatload of stuff. We have a few questions. We'll just stay on and we'll answer those questions. But we also wanted to be beyond just this webinar. We wanted to be useful. Given our two kind of audiences of people, we have a double offer that we wanted to put out there for folks. If you are not already on SharePoint, but you are thinking about moving to SharePoint, we have a SharePoint readiness assessment that we can do. We can hop on a call, talk you through, get an understanding of your environment, some unique things about workflow. I was doing this with a company last week, and they had this unique workflow that they were asking, hey, will this work in SharePoint? What could potentially go wrong? That sort of stuff. We're happy to do that as a way of introducing ourselves and our company if you're not familiar with us or you haven't worked with us before. If you are part of the other group, I think the plus 50% group that's currently using SharePoint or using SharePoint a little, but not completely, we can do a make my SharePoint better assessment and provide you a little bit of free consulting, give you a sense of how you can use SharePoint better, what some of the opportunities are. So those two QR codes that are up on your screen right now, one or the other, SharePoint readiness or make my SharePoint better, or you just do the old fashioned way. It's not as fun as using Microsoft Forms, which is in Microsoft 365, and the QR codes, but you can just send Jermaine or Ryan an email as well. So if you want to do it that way, feel free. There's our contact information. And there you go. So,
all right. Still a few questions in the Q&A. Do you mind if I tackle the Kayla question?
Yeah, please. Well, let's just hammer through them in order that they came in, and we'll just stay on until we have them all answered.
Great. Okay, so I'll kick off with Kayla, and then you can jump in where if you want to add anything to it. Is there a file or document size restriction for sharing? The answer is no. Because you're sharing access to the document in the location that the document is, the document never moves. It doesn't get transmitted via email because you're sharing it via a secure link that leads the person back to the same place. So the document itself never moves. So because of that, there's no size restriction. You can share any size of document, access to any document size, folder, etc. It wouldn't matter because it's a link to the location, you're not sending the document to the person.
And if you run out of space in your SharePoint archive, you can just get more space.
Yeah, I think it's like 30 cents or something per gig of space after your total tenant space is used up. But it takes a while for most people to use up their tenant space.
Awesome. Right. Okay, so Vicky had a question about could you talk a little bit about how an organization could move to SharePoint? What do you do with the library of documents that exist in the old-fashioned W drive? What does the migration process look like? So that's great. Jermaine, you can jump in. I'll start and feel free to jump in because you work with our team on an ongoing basis with these migrations. So the first thing that's super important is a foundation of best practices. So a foundation of best practices around SharePoint in terms of understanding all the things that need to be in place that could potentially go wrong with the SharePoint migration, right? Do you have any AutoCAD files in there? Do you have any files that are really long? What are the total number of files? What's the total number of directories? There's all sorts of things like that. So making sure when somebody is doing a SharePoint migration that before they get to the point of doing that, they've been running a process around audit, review, align the network to best practices. They've done a deep dive. They understand your file server structure, the security, the permissions, that sort of thing. And then you have a choice. You can either do a pick it all up and put it in the same folder structure, the same security, the same way that you have it in your W drive right now, or you can use it as a, hey, let's start fresh. Let's change the security groups. Let's modernize how we're doing security, and let's put people in different buckets, and let's change folders and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, one of the recommended ways really to do this so that you get the best benefit out of SharePoint is to look at your files that you have today and create the required team sites that link to each of the different sections or types of file, from a file permission access, team permissions, etc. So instead of granulated permissions file by file, what you would end up doing is adding group permissions related to the form function of the document and the team site that it belongs to. And then based on that, you delegate access within that site. So it's a different way to work, because then everything is more, the organization becomes a bit flatter as opposed to deep when it comes to number of files, etc.
I think the other thing that's important to understand about a migration period is, even if you've got boatloads of data that you want to migrate, the data migration can help well before the switch is flipped.
Correct.
Or it can happen. So it can happen in the background, that the data is being uploaded to your SharePoint site in the cloud. And then when you're ready to cut off access to the file server and move to SharePoint, you do that. You can do it in pieces, like we've done sort of group by group or department by department. You can do it all in once. It really depends the size of your organization, the complexity, that sort of thing. And then the piece that so many people forget with a migration is that user training, adoption, that sort of, we're going to be working differently on Monday than we were on Friday.
Yeah.
Right. And we have to have that mentality. And that takes over, that happens over the course of some months, really, because you want to train people, you want to get their feedback, you want to look at it on an ongoing basis. So it's not too many IT companies look at this, and IT folks will look at SharePoint as being a simple, like, copy a bunch of files to a different place and then good luck, we're with you, win or tie. You don't want to take that approach, because then you're not going to get the most out of what you're investing in that migration. You're not going to save people's time.
Perfect. Next question. Jade wants to know if a file restored to previous version, do the versions between restored and the current remain part of the version history? Answer is yes. It just becomes the current version, and every version, including the previous version that you just clicked on, will still be in the version history. Can PDF and doc files be uploaded to the same file? I'm gonna tweak that a bit. Hopefully Catherine is looking for, if we share a file folder, can it also contain PDF files, doc files, Excel files? The answer is yes. You can upload anything to a file within SharePoint and share it via a link to someone else.
Yeah, the other thing is, if she may be talking about, like, can you import, like, you can open a PDF document into a Word document and then combine two, but you might need to do it in the actual application.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Leona's asking, maybe too micro, but is there a way to initiate two-step authentication for external persons where a site is shared? I.e., I've added the email address, but would like them to have to additionally authenticate via, multi-factor authentication, which is a security best practice.
Yes, the answer is 100% yes. You can have them prove that it's their email account by logging in and verifying their email. You can also have them send a verification. You can have the Microsoft send a verification email to the person's email with a specific code. If the person doesn't have access to the email that they're trying to share the document to, then they won't get the verification code. They won't be able to verify. So yes, you can add an additional layer of multi-factor authentication to that to ensure that the right person is receiving the file.
Leona had another question too, which I will, Leona, as you suggest, we can follow up with you afterwards and talk you through she's a specific question about geographic location and that sort of stuff of documents that we can go through there. Jermaine, do you want to take Peter's question? Yeah,
sure. Non-365 applications access files stored in SharePoint. So any web-based application with the right configuration, whether it's a VPN tunnel, a direct tunnel, not the classic VPN, but a private network tunnel between the two pieces of software with the right access or an API key can access the applications in a secure way. It really does depend on whether or not the piece of software or the other storage of files has that built into their application. That's something that has to come from the other side. So Microsoft will be happy to integrate and create that API key that matches their API key, but it's a data transfer between two different types of software managing files has to go two ways. So even though Microsoft would allow them to have access, they need to allow Microsoft to have access to the software so that the files can pass in between the two. So the answer is yes. It's just a bit more complicated and it does require actual people who actually do code development and API development for that integration.
Okay, I got to quickly answer our last question, which is, can documents be full text Boolean search? I believe I'm answering this question. So Boolean, if it's in reference to Boolean operators like and, or, not, if you want to put those into search terms, yes, you can in SharePoint. You just need to put them in capital letters. So hopefully that answers that question. We are 1 minute past 2 o'clock. This has been great. Tons of questions, tons of attendees. As we mentioned, feel free to follow up with us afterwards. Register for one of those assessments if you'd like a little bit more advice from us. We're here to help. Thanks for watching. Thanks for registering. Jermaine, thanks for joining us today.
No problem.
Everybody,
Happy to be here. Thanks, everybody.
have a great day.